Let's dig into the estrous cycle. And one of the first things we need to understand about the estrous cycle is just a reminder that the cycle is spelled O-U-S. And the actual period of exhibiting receptive behavior to the male is estrus. And that is only spelled with a U-S. And that's one of those things that as you go into Repro and some of the other classes that you're going to need to be aware of, that spelling does count in a lot of these things. So we're going to take a look and kind of map out the estrous cycle of the ewe. In your notes, you should have both the ewe and the doe. The days is just different. This is going to work off basically a 17-day cycle. And so we have the days across the bottom that are relative to the estrus, period of heat. And so, let me put my pointer on. So we have day 0 through day 16. And then the cycle starts over again. So as we take a look, the first hormone we're going to talk about is the estrogen, or estradiol. And what we see in a pattern is a day or two before day 0, we start to see an elevation in estrogen. And we're going to talk about the exact functions of some of these. But let's start looking and visualizing the pattern. It's going to peak just before day 0 and then fall off again. Next, we're going to have what is called LH, or luteinizing hormone. And what happens is that as the estrogen elevates, so does the LH, and that causes a spike. This LH spike is actually what's going to cause estrus to happen and the receptivity to the male. Then we'll see the LH drop off and go throughout the cycle. Next is progesterone. And so what happens is after LH drops off about day 2 or 3, and this is actually timed with ovulation, if you think about it. On the sheep, ovulation was about 24 hours after impregnation. And so if we think about, they're going to be displaying estrus for about 30 hours. And so somewhere in here is ovulation, and in the next 24 hours or so, the animal or the ewe is going to have to determine, is she pregnant or not pregnant? Did fertilization happen? And that's where progesterone will elevate as the body determines if fertilization happens. If the body is pregnant, the progesterone will stay elevated until the offspring are born. If the body is not pregnant, progesterone will drop off, and that decline is going to trigger the next cycle, the next spike of estrogen, LH, and the next ovulation. We have in here this little hormone called prostaglandin, PGF2 alpha. And this is actually going to stimulate the rupture. If it's present, it's going to rupture a structure on the ovary that's going to cause all this cycle to happen again. And so it's kind of a decision-making process. If this happens, then the body's going to do this. If this happens, the next hormone's going to come into play. So we're going to need to keep this visual as we talk about these individual hormones. In the doe, because they have a 21-day cycle, you're still going to see the spike of LH. You're going to see the progesterone, you see the estrogen, you'll see the progesterone elevate, or pregnant, no, going to drop off and start that process over again. And prostaglandin's going to be prevalent. So it's the same, it's just slightly extended because there's more days in the estrus cycle. So one thing we do need to understand is the feedback mechanisms for a variety of hormones. And this does all start in the brain, in the hypothalamus of the brain. The hypothalamus secretes a hormone called luteinizing hormone, releasing hormone, which is really a complex name, or GnRH, gonadotropin releasing hormone. And that's going to trigger the pituitary to produce a couple of different hormones. LH, luteinizing hormone, and follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH. those are going to target the ovaries. And if those are present, like that LH spike, it's going to say, hey, ovaries, we need to ovulate. And so once the ovulation happens, then the body's saying, okay, then we're going to see progesterone or estrogen, depending on what's going on. And both of those actually have negative feedback. If they're elevated, they're going to shut down the luteinizing releasing hormone and say, hey, we don't need LH and FSH. We're trying to figure out what we're doing, whether the body's pregnant or not pregnant. Once that decision's made, those levels will drop off, allowing this process to happen again. And so we can utilize hormonal control of reproduction to be able to induce estrus and ovulation. This allows us to early breed some ewe lambs, and not like baby ewe lambs, but like yearling ewes. And we can do out-of-season breeding, potential to increase litter size, and we can now start using more artificial insemination and embryo transfer. But there is a cost. As you do these things, it costs money, and it doesn't mean increased fertility. It's going to increase labor, because if you synchronize breeding, you're going to synchronize lambing. Do you have the facility and labor needs? And you need to make sure that if you're doing this without LAP AI, do you have enough rams to go around? So these are not a crutch for poor management, but they're meant to enhance good management. So there's going to be 3 ways we can induce estrus or ovulation. It's going to be through regression of what's called the corpus luteum, the CL, delaying ovulation, or some combination of the two. So we're going to move forward in the next video to talk about the individual hormones and their roles, and then how we can utilize them to control the estrus cycle.